Today we welcome Kellie Gordley. She is the Education and Training Coordinator at Virginia Mason for Sterile Processing. Kellie is a certified registered central sterile technician. She's also a board member of the International Association of Healthcare Central Services and Material Management. You'll hear us call that ISHM. That is a great organization that we encourage you to get in contact with. They have a lot of good education. It's a great way to network if you are in the sterile processing field. And I think Kellie's going to be able to tell us a little bit more about that organization and some upcoming events before our webinar here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kellie. Kellie, welcome. Thank you so much for your slides today. And if you'd like to open your line, we're ready to roll.
All right, perfect. Well, again, thank you for having me, Jamie. I very much appreciate being with you all this afternoon. Yes, I work for Virginia Mason as the training coordinator in the sterile processing department, and I've been with this organization for about 6 years. And as Jamie said, I'm the secretary for the chapter in the Pacific Northwest and with the ISHM organization. And just a quick announcement that we'll be having a training seminar October 22nd, which is on a Saturday, and I believe it's going to be held at Swedish Cherry Hill campus. So for more information on that, you can look up that on our website for the Pacific Northwest chapter of ISHM. So today we can get started on our presentation. Jamie contacted me and asked me to share a little bit more information just in regards to environment of care, in regards to the sterile processing department. So I figured I would title this presentation Sterile Processing 101, kind of focusing on the fundamentals for cleaning and sterilization processes. Because no matter how big or small your organization might be, if you focus on fundamentals, you really can't go wrong. You know, with all the headlines in the news today in regards to hospital-acquired infections, cross-contamination of patients, and that kind of thing, it's a major concern for organizations large and small. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So kind of the first basic understanding for the central service technician is the basic understanding of microbiology and the chain of infection and how that works. One of the main purposes of the Central Service Department, or sterile processing, depending on the organization and what you call your department, it's to stop the spread of infection and to protect both the patients and the employees from harmful microorganisms. So this is a little graphic that I was actually able to find on the internet, but it was fantastic because it had surgical instruments in it, which I loved. So it kind of shows you your infectious agent, the reservoir, and so on. And with the chain of infection, infectious disease processes is a complex interrelationship between the source, the host, and the environment. So if only one of these links in the chain of infection is removed or broken, then the spread of an infectious disease potentially cannot occur. So with that, we'll look at the kind of the processing cycle for surgical instrumentation. The work performed in central and sterile processing departments, they have to follow a proper workflow. The workflow is important to fight and to break the chain of infection, and also to prevent cross-contamination, so that everything has that dirty to clean flow. Soiled material must be isolated from their clean counterparts. This ensures acceptable processing conditions. So one-way flow of materials from, again, soil to the clean processing area into the sterile storage area is required, and it's also recommended practice by our regulatory agencies. They make these recommendations, such as AORN, the AMI, CDC, and others. So we'll start at the very beginning, and we'll start with point of use. So it'd be our end users or our OR customers, or those in the clinic, those that are using the devices, the items on patients. So the instrument decontamination begins at the point of use. Point of use is defined as any area where reusable surgical instruments and medical devices are used. Instrument decontamination begins at the point of use and then is continued in the decontamination area in your sterile processing departments. So point of use preparation, it does not replace the cleaning process, but it does begin the cleaning process. And so if we look at a lot of manufacturers' instructions for use, most of them will cover point of use cleaning. So we'll also look at common errors from point of use in surgery or in your clinics. So failure to wipe off gross soil from instruments or to flush lumens or suctions with sterile water during the procedure. Also a delay in transporting soiled instruments to the decontamination area. Failure to spray instruments with a pre-soaked solution. Some have like enzymatic sprays and that. And transporting without using a closed container or a container without a biohazard label when you're transporting dirty items from end use to the decontamination areas and they're not properly labeled. So this is kind of a graphic picture here, but dried blood can damage instruments, and it is very difficult to clean once that bioburden has dried. Then usually soaking for extended periods in enzymatic detergents within the decontamination room is required in order to be able to remove that dried-on soil. All right, some other common errors from point of use surgery. So in this presentation, I've kind of included some live, real, in living color action shots, so to speak, from our organization. So I'm kind of showing you in-house what kind of happens from time to time in real life. So these are what our departments lovingly refer to as the grenade set. So you just see things. This is not the correct way to send a surgical instrumentation tray from point of use from the OR down to your decontamination area. You can see there's kind of dried on soil on some of these areas, and the instrumentation is all kind of crazy in there. It's just a disorganized mess, so to speak. So you can see a lot of the bioburden and the dried soil is in there. And one of the other issues sometimes that we find in your lower left-hand corner, you might see that little circle, and what that is a blade left on a knife handle. So one of the big things that I tell our technicians is that once you get a grenade set that looks like this, never just reach your fingers and your hands into that tray, because sharps, suture needles, blades, things of that nature could be left in those trays, and damage to your person could happen. So always ensure that in training that you're teaching your technicians also about self-care and to be mindful of processing instrumentation, because we don't want somebody to slice their fingers open or get stuck with a sharps injury. All right, so then we'll discuss the decontamination room. So the decontamination area is where all the soiled instruments are received from using departments. Probably at smaller facilities, regional medical centers, or smaller clinics, it's not going to be this expansive of a space, but it'll probably be like a smaller room in which you can make that work, but again, for your environment of care, ensuring that that's got a one-way flow from dirty to clean, and that the doors are kept closed at all times. All items that are returned to the decontamination area are considered contaminated and potentially infectious. So standard precautions must be exercised in this area of the Central Service Department. Upon entry into the decontamination room, proper PPE must be worn. Microorganisms are invisible, of course, to the naked eye, but it does not mean that they are not present and that they could be harmful. So my little picture up here at the top, kind of cartoony, but those are supposed to be my little microorganisms hiding out on different surfaces and areas of the decontamination room. I've actually used this visual in some staff training as well. And also our model here is another technician that works here of kind of proper donning of PPE, but that has to be a requirement before entering your decontamination space to protect your staff members. Again, we'll discuss standard precautions and the use or the reason of PPE. So the CDC has developed, of course, guidelines for handling contaminated items. So central service technicians should consider all items entering the decontamination area contaminated. There are sometimes on occasion where an instrument tray that was never opened that should have went to the return shelf made it on a dirty case cart and it was wheeled into decontamination. It still has to be popped open and reprocessed because think of your decontamination area as kind of the black hole. Once it enters that door through into the decontamination area, it's that one-way workflow. So it goes from the dirty to clean. So it can't be backed out and taken to the return shelf and put back into sterile storage once it's made it through the door of the decontamination room. So standard precautions guidelines teach us to assume that all soiled or contaminated items harbor harmful microorganisms and that we must protect ourselves from direct contact. So standard precaution guidelines and knowledge that all body fluids are potentially infectious guides technicians in the safe handling and the cleaning of all medical devices entering the decontamination area. So this applies to all patients regardless of diagnosis or presumed infectious status. So the precautions consist of appropriate hand washing and also the wearing of PPE. So most of the time in central service or sterile processing, we're not going to know a patient's diagnosis, but we're just going to assume that everything is potentially infectious and could harm us. So that kind of keeps us as technicians in that area doing that particular task and function safe. So the purpose of decontamination, or what it is, decontamination is a physical or chemical process that renders the reusable medical device that's been contaminated with harmful microbes safe for further handling. So it involves thorough cleaning process that may be accomplished with manual cleaning by hand using the sinks or basins with brushes, sponges, and the like, and or with mechanical washers. These are two of our technicians that are working in the decontamination room. All right, so decontamination is fundamental. Cleaning is fundamental and the most important first step of reprocessing. So if we don't get our job done correctly here at the first step, then the prep and pack and the sterilization and further on down the line doesn't really mean too much if we still have bioburden and other items left on devices. So as they say in the sterile processing world, that one can clean without sterilizing, but one cannot sterilize without cleaning. And also kind of another comparison and contrast is the proper use of PPE. So we'll kind of call that out as well. So on the right-hand side, I have a technician here who's wearing a face mask over her face, and her nose and mouth are completely covered underneath the chin. So that way she's not breathing in anything. Her face is protected. Also from aerosolization, that's a tough word, aerosolization from the spray. It gets humid in there. It also, with all the particles and different things from the rinsing and the spray guns and stuff, will kick up moisture and particulates. Also, she's got a face shield and cover. Her hair is completely covered with a disposable hair cover. She's got the impervious gown, the gloves, and then also shoe covers. Our other person over here on the right, they've got a mask on, but as you can see, it's kind of covering their chin, kind of their mouth a little bit, but their nose is sticking out. And sometimes you'll see this commonly with technicians. When they're back there, it's kind of a humid spot anyway. It's hard to breathe under that mask, to be honest. So they'll kind of start pushing that mask down. So you'll kind of have to kind of monitor and ensure that they're wearing those masks appropriately during their shift. Also, she's got like the cloth hair cover. They're very cute. They're very fashionable. However, our organization no longer allows those reusable cloth hats anywhere within the organization. So those have been banned and outlawed, so we can't wear our fancy hats anymore. But it's also not appropriate without having the disposable cover like this person has on the right-hand picture here, because still whatever's in that room is landing on her hat, and then as she walks in and out in the organization, she's not changing that cloth hat. All right, so common errors in the decontamination area. So not donning and doffing proper PPE, so kind of called out the proper wearing of it. Not having a 3-section sink, soak, wash, rinse. Now, not all places will be able to have that luxury, but if you have like a small room that's been converted into your decontamination space, maybe the use of, if you have the counter space, to allow for a cleaning basin, a soaking basin, a rinsing basin. Those are all at least kept separate, and that your dirty to clean flow. But there's ways that you can kind of set that up in a space to where you can be able to do that correctly. Over or under using ultrasonic cleaners, not having all the instruments or equipment's IFUs, that's short for instructions for use, and then not following the manufacturer's instructions for use. So as you can see our little dramatic picture over here, this is a picture of me telling a technician, no, stop, don't immerse something that can't be immersed in enzymatic detergent. So a lot of medical devices will tell you in the instructions for use whether an item is immersible, whether you or not, and if it is immersed, it could cause irreparable damage or a very expensive repair to a device. So understanding those cleaning instructions and how to do it properly is really extremely important to the process. Then testing some, but not all of the mechanical cleaners. If you have washer disinfectors, being able to test those on a daily basis to ensure that they're cleaning properly is important. And then improper loading of medical cleaners. So if those things are overloaded, you have too heavy of trays on those types of things, those impingement arms and that type of stuff. Very similar to loading the dishwasher in your house. If you overload it, things are going to not be cleaned as effectively as they should. So now that we know cleaning is fundamental and it's the most important step of reprocessing, what happens when proper cleaning steps are not followed closely? Well, our organization, through quality metrics and measuring, have discovered that our sterile processing department, the technicians, will probably clean and reprocess 52,000 instruments individually every single day. So with that many instrument sets back in decontamination and getting through knee pans and hip pans and ortho sets and laparoscopic grasper sets and Da Vinci stuff, there's a gamut of different items that go through there that they have to know how to clean properly. There could be some times where things could get overlooked, or if they don't know how to clean something properly because they haven't been trained properly. This is what I will show you. This could happen. So this, again, is kind of like our horror show slide is what I'm calling this. These are items that have made it through the washer disinfector onto the prep and pack side of the department, and as technicians have been assembling and checking for functionality and cleanliness, they have found items and things that were not so clean in their trays. And so their inspection tables have to be broken down, cleaned. These devices have to be sent back to the decontamination area for recleaning. So proper cleaning protocols it's a must be followed at all times to ensure safe handling of surgical instruments. So of course this protects our employees as well as our patients. So the use of ultrasonic cleaners, proper size brushes for the cannulas and suctions, it's absolutely imperative that our technicians are empowered and they know if I have a lumen, if I have a cannula, suctions, I'm going to use a proper size brush. I'm going to flush those items. I'm going to rinse those items properly. I'm going to ensure that there's no bioburden before I put that into a washer decontaminator. All right, so now we'll get into the preparation packaging side of the department. So once we've made it through the decontamination area, our items will come through our washer disinfector after cleaning onto our prep and pack area, or the clean side of our department. So this is where our CS technicians are going to start inspecting instruments for cleanliness, functionality. They'll test scissor tips for sharpness. They'll be looking for burrs and nicks and blades. Ensure that your forceps, the teeth are all aligning, all those good things. They ensure items are inspected according to the manufacturer's instructions for use. And all instruments are required for the set are present, and they're checked off on those count sheets. Here we use a computerized barcoding scanning system on our instrument trays. And so the technician here, she scanned the little barcode that's here on the basket, kind of like they do at the grocery store. And then up here on the computer screen, that barcode will associate that instrument set, and it calls out every item that's required, what we call the recipe or the count sheet. So it'll tell you how many clamps, scissors, forceps, and whatnot are required for that tray. And so as they go through, they will click off everything that they've counted and inspected. All right, so common errors in our reprocessing area are the prep and pack. So not inspecting 100% of our instruments. So again, the average sterile processing technician, they're going through and inspecting thousands of instruments every single day and reprocessing that. So there could be some times where they forgot to check, a scissor tip, a blade, ensuring that their forceps teeth are all aligned. It's a big job. So anyway, I just kind of put a picture here of like broken instruments up here, because that sometimes could slip through the cracks. So if they're not paying attention to detail or distracted, which could easily happen with the phone ringing and doing turnarounds and whatnot, that is a possibility. Also, not using inspection lamps and lenses. If you have the ability to bring any magnifying device to your prep and pack area, is a great tool for technicians to be able to kind of look into those tiny serrations. Definitely eye instruments, if you guys do service line for eye cases. Those things are really, really tiny, very delicate, very small. And I know as the years go on, just my reading glasses sometimes aren't enough for myself. So it does get kind of challenging every once in a while to see those things. Also, cleaning instruments and or rigid container systems, if they're not cleaned properly, could contain like little bits of bioburden or different things like that. And also, if you catch technicians cleaning instruments on your prep and pack side, call them out on it, because the prep and pack area is for clean items. They shouldn't be doing decontamination processes in a clean area. So remember that workflow from the dirty to clean. So if you have a tech and they're like, look like they're just like scrubbing at something, or, you should probably encourage that person to send that back to the decontamination area for recleaning. Assembling hinged instruments in the closed position. So all these little devices up here, all of our rings on stringers, if the ratchets are locked and closed, that's not recommended for the sterilization process because it can't get to the jaws to penetrate with the sterilant. Using improper materials, writing pens, sterilization tape on the inside or outside of trays is not recommended. And also the paper count sheets should not be folded inside of trays. We actually had a challenge with that ourselves. We were folding up the recipe or the count sheets and setting that just inside to the side of the tray between the rigid container and the instrument set, and it was kind of a folded up piece of paper, which was causing us to have wet packs. So we had to remove all of those recipes from the inside of the metal containers and tape them to the handle of the outside. And then again, load labels placed on disposable wrap. So right here you have a picture, like the load sticker didn't quite make it up here to the sterilization tape where it would kind of adhere itself. So it kind of got stuck on the blue wrap here on the outside. The problem with this is that once that makes it, this one looks like survived the sterilizer okay, but that could easily come off. And then your end user, your clinic, or your OR customer would not be able to open that package without a load sticker. So just little things like that, attention to detail. All right, so now for the sterilization process in our instrument processing journey. Medical devices must be properly prepared before sterilization to assure that the steam will come into contact with all the surfaces. So that's kind of why our area up here in the prep and pack area was checking for cleanliness, for functionality, for arranging the surgical instrument trays in a way to where that tray is properly assembled so that it will allow proper steam penetration, or if you're sending them through like STERAD or VPRO, like the hydrogen peroxide low temperature sterilization processes, laying those devices or those items out in a way that's going to allow sterilant penetration is really, really important because that'll prevent, again, wet packs and the like. Effective sterilization also requires that the sterilizing agent be in contact, again, with all the surfaces for the prescribed time. Air removal, steam penetration, and condensate drainage are enhanced by proper positioning and by use of the perforated baskets. Instrument sets should be prepared in trays large enough to equally distribute the mass, and the configuration of instrument sets should be evaluated to help ensure that they remain dry. All right, so now we go through some common errors that we see with sterilization. So improper loading of sterilizers, for example, too many packs, wrap packs or containers in contact with the chamber, and then pouches that are laid flat on the cart, and then the steam, acronym is PCD, which is the process challenge devices, are placed on top of the pack or between two packs. So kind of what I'm trying to say in that paragraph is kind of depicted in this picture right here. Right here where we have this, looks like it's come out of the sterilization, but that little green square that you're seeing, that's what you call a process challenge device. So it's kind of like a package that's wrapped. It's got an indicator on the outside, and within it is cardstock, and inside the cardstock is a biological indicator and also a chemical indicator inside. So these devices are meant to lay kind of flat on their back and not be straight up like it's shown in this picture. And it's supposed to be placed over the coolest part of the chamber in your sterilizer, which is over the drain. So it might be in the right location because some of these, the drains are toward the front, some are toward the middle, depending on where your drain is located in your sterilizer. But that device should be flat, not straight up and down. Also, there's quite a bit of linen packs, so you want to have a little bit of like separation between your items so that you have proper air removal and steam penetration to get through. If you have your linen packs kind of bundled really too compact and tight, you're not going to be able to get that steam penetration and proper air removal if you have a pre-vacuum sterilizer. Also, not having the instrument manufacturer's instructions for use is also another one, because the instructions for use are going to call out your sterilization parameters. So if you're not sure, either call the manufacturer. I also recommend an agency called OneSource. They have an online lookup, and so all you have to have is your manufacturer and then maybe your catalog number or the reference number of the item, and they have, I think, thousands of manufacturers' instructions for use in their database that you can electronically pull up online at your fingertips. So those are actually really nice. Nice subscription to have access to, especially if you have an OR customer that's asking, for immediate use sterilization parameters, and you're not sure if that's a device that can be sent through immediate use sterilization or not, that kind of gives you access to that. Or creating like a notebook that has instructions for use. Something that's accessible and easy for the technicians at point of use to grab and be able to quickly look through, so that when they're under time constraints, they can access those instructions for use, look up sterilization parameters. And then also not following the instrument manufacturer's instructions for use. Again, for example, sterilization process and cycle parameters. So if we have something that went into for too short of a contact time, we've actually had technicians who run, they'll select, at midnight they'll run the Bowie-Dick test on their steam sterilizers. Get those all good, and then our first group in the morning at 7 a.m., our day shift will come on. They'll organize a load for the sterilizer, put it in, and instead of hitting like standard cycle, they've left it on the Bowie-Dick test. And so then we have an entire load that's come in that we cannot release to sterile storage. It has to be broken down and reprocessed because it wasn't sterilized on the proper cycle or sterilization parameter. So attention to detail like that's also important. Placing a steam sterilized cart near an AC vent. So on our top picture, after something has gone through the sterilization process, they're going to still be warm. They're going to still be a little hot. So you're going to want to put that in a low traffic area and give that time to cool down. But if we push that cart directly under an air vent where you got cool air, blowing directly onto hot items that have just come out of a sterilizer, there is a big potential for the steam that's still evaporating and wicking to condense inside the set, and then you have a wet pack. And then one other issue is not allowing sterilized items to cool to the recommended temperature. Here we have 75 degrees Fahrenheit to 24 degrees centigrade. So cooling recommendations. And I don't know if you guys have gone through this in your organization, but one of our challenges is like turnarounds or stat back items, where the OR in their surgery schedule in the day, they've used items in their first and second cases, and they're needing them directly back, probably later in the afternoon for like 5th and 6th cases. So we put those priority sets like through the washers in the decontamination area, prep and package it, and then sterilize that. But then we have the OR rooms calling, like, where's our minor set? We need it immediately. But we have issues with, well, is it too hot to send up? Is it okay? So we've gone through and looked up the AMI standard and the ST79. And so this is kind of the publication reference, section 8.8.1. And it kind of spells out here, although the minimum cooling time of 30 minutes is recommended, adequate cooling could require 2 hours or more. And that is saying, if you have a really heavy, say, ortho set that's got a lot of weighty metal to it, it's going to take a lot longer for that to cool down. So cooling items should remain untouched for 30 minutes, up to 2 hours after sterilization. Pores of packaging and filters, they remain open until they're cool enough. So the blue wrap, if you've ever looked at it really closely, it's kind of got these little dot designs on its surface. And so what those do is kind of acts like the pores in your skin, is that when they're in the sterilizer, they kind of open up, and that's how the sterilant penetrates that packaging. And so when they come out of a hot sterilizer or they're warm, those pores will, as they cool down, they will close. So if you ever catch technicians like putting their hands on top of hot items to test temperature by the heat on their hand, not a good idea, because that could be causing some strike through from whatever's on their hand into the packaging. So yeah, so say no touchy on the hot blue wrap items. We use in our department a heat sensing gun that we can point and shoot at the device, and that will give us a temperature reading for the items to see if they can be released directly to the OR customer, or is proper time to release that into sterile storage for put away. So then we'll go into sterile storage. And in sterile storage, so after the sterilization process, sterile packs and instruments are stored until they're needed. And the activities of personnel in the sterile storage area and the environment itself impact the maintenance of pack sterility. So basic concerns. So primary conditions that can adversely affect the ability of a sterile package to maintain its sterility until it's opened by the user at the point of use include the following. So moisture and fluid, or fluid contamination, dirt and dust debris. We've had some issues before in the past where we'd have our Dear EVS folks come in and they have a mop. It should be like a wet mop on the floor, but they have a broom and a dustpan. And so in the sterile storage area or just anywhere in the department period shouldn't happen because, you know, the little dust bunnies that will collect and form, with the broom that's kicking that up into the air, and then that's going to land directly onto our sterile packaging. Also physical damage to packaging, including abrasions, cuts, tears, punctures, broken seal, and then just breakdown of the packaging material itself. So this is a picture of one of many shelves in our sterile storage area here in our sterile storage department, or in the sterile processing department. So I think our organization maintains about, I think it's between 4,800 to 5,000 instrument sets for the OR alone, and that's not including regional medical centers and the clinics within the organization. So it's busy for sure. All right, so to give you guys some more real-life shots, here's real-life sterile storage area. So our storage environments, of course, should be clean, dry, and easily accessible by authorized personnel. Authorized personnel meaning they are in like the hospital scrubs, not like your street scrubs. We've had a medical assistant walk in before looking for some supplies, and they're like, "Excuse me, can somebody help me?" They had no hair cover. They were in their, like, you know, street scrubs, and everybody looked at them like, "Oh no!" And so she's like, "Oh!" So she ran out really quick. So authorized personnel, meaning in OR attire, because we are supporting that sterile environment in the OR as well. Our decontamination, preparation, and packaging areas should be physically separated. So if this isn't possible, extra care is required so that air and traffic always flows from the clean to dirty areas, and no pass-through traffic should be permitted. So if you can't have physical barriers such as walls, structures that would separate all these types of things, I know some places have like put up partitions as a reminder, like, well, I can't bounce from this clean spot over to the dirty spot and then walk back from the dirty over here to the clean. You have to try to do some type of a thing. I don't know if it's like pulling a curtain, setting up partitions, arrows on the floor that would direct any personnel in the appropriate work pattern or workflow of that area. Also, air supply to the storage areas should be clean and dust-free as possible, and this usually requires filtration. This room should be under positive air pressure to reduce airborne contamination. And I believe that the recommended standards for sterile storage, I believe would be, let's see here, this sterile storage should be about 75 degrees Fahrenheit, 24 degrees centigrade, and it should not exceed 70% humidity in your sterile storage area. All right, so some common errors in our sterile storage area, or things to kind of look out for. Placing sterile items in high traffic areas. I know that this sometimes can be an issue in clinics, in kind of your smaller centers where space, of course, everywhere you go is at a premium. So sometimes that's really kind of unavoidable. Maybe putting like covers or maybe cabinets with doors to cover that as the items are in a high traffic area, as people walk by, that at least there's some type of a protection against people bumping into things in their street clothes, or packaging's getting damaged from, bumps and tears and that type of thing, or just the regular wear and tear, the dust and the different things that could be in the air and the environment. Finding a way to protect those items. Also, improper ceiling tiles or storage shelves. I know ceiling tiles have been kind of, they need to be made of like a wipeable surface if possible. Like regular office ceiling tiles, I know probably a lot of smaller clinics might have those, but I think in procedure areas or anywhere that you're doing instrument reprocessing, because of sprays and the chemicals and the different items that you're using, those particulates could go up. So if there's at any point where you have high dusting by EVS or those types of things, you want to have a surface that's easy to clean. Also, dust on storage shelves or in storage bins. So we have this lovely picture up here at the top where you can see somebody's rubbed their finger on that shelf and they pulled up that like dust bunny on their finger and they've made that lovely like fingerprint mark. That's a shelf that's kind of dusty and may need some attention to get that sandy wiped or cleaned, however well you can get that done. Because we don't want our sterile storage area or items that are ready for patient use to be sitting in an environment like that. And then putting clean items on top of sterile items is also another issue. Exceeding temperature and or humidity ranges, like I mentioned the recommendation before. Also documenting your hydrometer clock readings every day, your temperature and your humidity, and documenting the time, I know is one thing that like Joint Commission, CMS, and all the other auditors, they kind of do look at those humidity hydrometer clock records and readings. So ensure that you're documenting that according to standards. Let's see here. Stacking heavy wrapped packs on top of each other, and stacking a rigid container on top of a wrapped pack. So this lovely picture, I think this was on a return cart, but if you look at this, I found this picture and was like, really? So setting a rigid container on top of a blue wrapped item in the sterile processing world is a big no-no. Obviously, a heavy item on top of a blue wrap is going to cause damage to the packaging and possibly to the medical device that's inside of the blue wrap. So you don't want, of course, heavy on top of lighter items, that kind of stuff. Also, we've got, like, I think random bins here for I'm not really sure what reason. But anyway, I'm sure this does not happen at any other facility. So, all right. So we'll move on to effective management of sterile processing. So to effectively manage the CS department, it is critical to ensure that all staff know and comply with best practices as defined by the national standards. Not just some of the time or most of the time, but all of the time. So that's kind of where right for this presentation, we're visiting the fundamentals and really trying to pay attention to the key details of each of those steps in the reprocessing cycle. Because if we stick to the fundamentals, no matter how large or small your organization is, no matter what your capital budget is, I know that those can play a big factor. However, if you focus on detail and if you focus on the fundamentals all the time to ensure that your patient is at the center of that care, then you will have a successful program. And as they say that, that sometimes is the enemy of always. Also, know your national standards and recommendations. There's tons of publications. Some of the main ones that I lean on, of course, is the ST79 with Ansi Amy. They call that our Sterile Processing Bible. And always make sure that on hand or in your department you have the most updated publication. If you are working with flexible endoscopes or high-level disinfection processes, I advise you to have the ST91 through ANSI AMI. This addresses specifically flexible endoscope reprocessing. And they also have another one, the I believe the ST57, and that deals with your high-level disinfection chemicals. So the AMI standards, the ST79, the 91, and the 57, those are all really good references, resources. You can even write your SOPs directly out of these. I know I lean on these and glean on these a great deal in order to write our standard work processes in our department. I'd also recommend the AORN guidelines. They have a fantastic section in the back from perioperative services on the decontamination, sterilization, kind of everything we've covered here. And then they also have, of course, a great section with flexible endoscopes and high-level disinfection processes as well. Down here is kind of a picture of the OneSource, kind of the website, what they look like. I just took a screenshot on there. And I kind of referenced that earlier in the presentation. This organization, they upload, like I said, thousands of manufacturers' instructions for use in dealing with tons of surgical instruments, reusable medical devices, and the like. So that's a quick kind of at your fingertips reference and able to look up an instruction for use really quickly. And then right here is a store's manual for one of their flexible intubation scopes. This is a model of scope that we clean personally. So also having those instructions for use in a file or on hand in your department. So if you have the device, you should have the instructions for use to go with that device so that you know the proper cleaning processes, inspection processes, as well as like any sterilization processes that go with that device. All right, and maintaining your quality assurance. So here's a couple of pictures of like some trainings and in-services and different things that we've done in sterile processing department here. So ongoing training and education. I'd say never stop repeating the broken record. You kind of feel like you're on repeat all the time saying the same thing, but sometimes redundancy and repetition until everyone's on the same page, because we have 60-plus employees in our department with our distribution staff as well as our sterile processing staff. And sometimes I've got night shift crew, evening shift crew, day shift. I've got weekends. We've got per diems. So being able to communicate that message, the same message, until everybody hears it, pinning everybody down so that everybody is informed. So you can never repeat yourself, I think, too much in this process. Also, auditing and environmental rounding is another important thing. I do kind of daily checks in our high-level disinfection area as well as the decontamination room. We do daily washer disinfector testing as well as testing on the ultrasonics daily. And also, like I mentioned earlier, with your Bowie-Dick testing on your pre-vacuum sterilization, running biologicals through your sterilizers, that type of thing. And then your environmental rounding. Checking out your floors. Do your floors need a little attention? Do they need some work? Maybe getting with your EVS personnel, your environmental services or the housekeeping, and say, hey, I'm feeling like we've gotten a little neglected, but the reason why I need you to come see us on the weekends, or like when you have a slower time for them to come and address your floors, is because our department's important because we support the sterile field in the OR and in the clinics. And so I think it's imperative that we do our best to try to keep as clean a house as we possibly can to maintain that sterile field. Also, documenting is important, and we have to document everything we do. And that's from our cleaning records to high-level disinfection processes, to our sterilization records, and then down to our training and competency and documenting that. And usually, as they say, if it wasn't documented, it never happened. So keeping up with all of that as well. Reporting. If you see something, call it out. Real-time conversations are important, but also if you have a good communication line with your clinic, your OR, your end users, that's important as well. So if we have a sterilizer that goes down, that's like one arm tied behind your back, communicating and reporting that to the OR. Say, hey, folks, we're down a sterilizer. We're called it in a work order. Bear with us as we try to get your items sterilized as best we can. Reviewing your processes, taking measurements. Anything that can be measured can be improved. Looking at external and internal defects. Reviewing what's the root cause of those, and then making action plans for that. Revising processes if you're having issues. Remedial training if that's important. Again, retraining and repeating and retraining, and then doing audits. I have 60-plus technicians here that I do training for, and I've actually invited infection prevention to come over and audit my records and ask them, if Joint Commission comes in, what are they looking for? Can you look through my records and tell me if I'm missing something? And they're usually more than happy to do that for you. And feedback is a gift. Maintaining quality assurance, identify areas for improvement, investigation and root cause analysis are important, risk assessment, corrective actions if needed, and then reach out to departments within your organization as resources, again, to build partnerships. So your ORs, your clinics, like I said, infection control and risk management. All right, so I guess I've come to the end. Does anyone have any questions?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask a live question, you may raise your hand using the raise hand feature below your name on the participants panel, or you may submit questions to the right in the chat panel. Please make sure to select all participants.
Kelly, hi, it's Jamie. While we're waiting for some more questions, what I think it's important to note for our audience being in critical access hospitals is that oftentimes our sterile processing team might be one person in the back.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So if sometimes they feel really isolated, and I'm just wondering if you have any advice on how to monitor those practices when you have a very small staff, and oftentimes everybody's wearing different hats.
Mm-hmm.
How would you prioritize monitoring those processes?
Well, I would say, like, if you can't get to it daily because of procedural constraints and patient care issues, and doing all the wearing the rest of the hats, designate. Maybe schedule it on your schedule so you're walking the shop floor basically. So take the time to if it's like first thing on Monday or maybe the middle of Monday, so where they're kind of into their day, and go in and just check on them. Hey, how are you doing? How are things going? How's the processes going? Take a survey of the environment. Maybe take a minute to, check in on them. How's it going? And then maybe take a minute while they're talking to you and they're working at the same time. Just kind of observe their practice and what they're doing. That I think that's totally appropriate to be able to try to fit that in somehow. And I would also say that I think a lot of times, like, our medical assistants in those areas are / sterile processing technicians / and so they probably feel a little bit of pressure and time constraint and a little overwhelmed at times. But your sterile processing technician or your medical assistant, if they're filling that role, even though they're behind the scenes or in the back of the, we live downstairs in the basement, no one sees us much, Also, I think from a leadership perspective, as a technician downstairs in the basement where I don't see too many people, it's really nice to have or to start to foster a culture of appreciation for that person downstairs or that person in the back room that nobody sees too often because they're, busy. They're kind of making magic happen. They're kind of like a Keebler elf behind the scenes that nobody's really seeing because they just need what they need in order to take care of patients, which should be the focus. But they do play a very critical role in patient care, even though it's indirect. So it's super nice to hear from your leaders that you are doing a fantastic job, and we appreciate what you do. I think that's
great.
That's great.
Yeah. So basically, don't just stick them in sterile processing and forget they're there. We did have a question come in from Pamela Stanley, and she asked, are surgical masks required in sterile storage?
In sterile storage, not necessarily in sterile storage unless the recommendations say like you have facial hair. So if somebody's got like a full beard or the goatee with a lot of facial hair, then you should wear a mask to be able to cover the facial hair. But I think that's also an OR requirement as well, if I'm not mistaken. But I think if you're in the OR, you have to wear a surgical mask anyway. So here in our organization, we have a rule that if you have facial hair, beard, mustache, that type of stuff, you should be wearing the face mask. But normally in sterile storage, the hospital attire, the scrubs laundered by the hospital, not street clothes scrubs. And then your hair is covered by the hair covers. And then if you don't have hospital-dedicated shoes, then you should be wearing shoe covers as well. But I don't think a mask is necessarily required, unless you have like a cold or something.
Great, thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, well, we are at the top of the hour. And if we have any additional questions, you're welcome to email them to me, Jamie Moran, at my email address is jamiem@qualishealth.org. And I'll forward those on to Kellie. She can get you a personal answer, and we'll get that back to you. Kellie, thank you. It was a great job. I think we've all learned a lot.
Oh,
and again, if we have any questions from our audience, do follow up. We're here to help. So thank you again.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.